Well, there you have it. I forgot to turn up the mic like a Nimrod. You know, I had a brother who used to call people Nimrod when we were kids and say, "Hey, Nimrod, go la la la." Apparently it's a bad term, but I don't know what the hell it means. What is a Nimrod? Nobody knows. But apparently it's a person who forgets to turn up the microphone prior to starting to talk. My name is Samuel Trapp. Hello. Good morning. Welcome. 573-746-8020 is the call-in line. If you have something useful to say, I shall pick up the phone. How about that? And if you don't, I'll just ignore you. And you know who you are. So at any rate, you can send emails that I never read to live at damradio.com or Samuel T at internationalflavor.com, Samuel T, modernlawecosystem.com, Samuel T at civicoutlaws.com. You can send those emails. Those I do look at, Civic Outlaws and what do you call it? Modern Law Ecosystem. I picked that last song, The Cure. So back, that was me. So sometimes I get to change them around before I come in. And sometimes I change them around when I leave, which might not be the best thing for people. Every once in a while, I'll put on 6 long play Pink Floyds. And that kind of defeats, well, maybe not, defeats the purpose of what we got going on here. But, I listen to Damn Radio. I get the music when I am otherwise engaged, and I like the music in the background. We have a great music selection at damradio.com/live. You can listen 24/7 to the fantastical music, and we're doing radio shows. I'm thinking that I have plenty of news to go through today. And there's many, many topics. Everybody knows I'm a talk show junkie. I'm a political discussion junkie, but mostly on the international level. Thus, the name of the show, International Flavor. If you like to listen to old ones, you can always go out to internationalflavor.com and listen to them. You can go to you can go to damradio.com/podcast and listen to every person on this radio platform and listen to all of their shows, because they're all also fantastical. And great people doing great things at this station. That's my little advertising plug for this AM. What with me being an international news junkie and a Russian speaker, I like to listen to things in Russian. And there was, I like to listen to Solovyov. I actually had an opportunity to listen to his show twice this week already. And very interesting things going on in the world. And I try to give a sort of a global approach to those things. And, there's so many stories to go through that sometimes it's difficult to organize my thoughts, and I just jump around from story to story because there's so many things. The battlefield advances in Seversk, Zaporizhia, and front is collapsing sort of things have been everywhere. Russian battlefield advances are speeding up, and Ukraine is losing so much so that the old Green Goblin has been caught. That's Zelensky, for those of you uninitiated. He is the Green Goblin, when I stole that from Alex Christoforou, who has a great show on that he usually does from either Greece or Cyprus, sometimes Moscow. So he's always traveling the planet pretty good. I've been on his show only once, but it was still pretty cool to be on his show. I did it from Kazan last year and did a little bit of a blurb about what's going on in Russia, what's going on with BRICS. And he has a very good show, Alex Christoforou, and he gives a news update on international stuff. And he's pretty good to listen to, and he's funny too. And his videos are pretty cool because he's walking through various places. Like I used to do when I was driving down the road, I'd just turn on the camera and start babbling in Russian, and that's how my channel got started on the Russian side. And I still got a butt ton of videos out there, and I really need to get back to doing it. My studio is almost complete, and I'm going to go go back to doing my Russian channel shows here pretty soon. Anyway, I'm just all over the farging map today, aren't I? Let's see. But the front is collapsing. The Ukrainian front is collapsing. Donald Trump is absolutely right to start requiring, and they say, hey, man, this past weekend they spent time in, I believe it was Berlin, trying to convince the old Z-man to do something smart for his people. There were... polls conducted in Ukraine. And quite surprisingly, Ukrainians allegedly, now I don't believe this, polls can be twisted, so I take all polls with a grain of salt because, first of all, no matter how big the pool, how big the sampling, I have an economics degree. That was my undergrad. I have economics and a focus in Russian studies from University of Illinois, Champaign, Urbana, that would be. And I have a economics / Russian studies. Now, it was a lot of fun. I did a lot of higher level econ and stuff like that. And all economics and study depends on the size of the sample. So I was looking at that. I always try to look at that when a sample comes up and or when a poll comes up because it's really important. And you have to, the bigger the sample, the more likely the results are okay, are not skewed. And this one was only based on 559 people polled in Ukraine. And it came out to be that there were a couple of key points there. And one of the key ones is that they still support the Z monster up to about 60%. So 300 and something of these nuts still support the Z monster. Well, that could be because everything is so tightly controlled. There is no second opinion. You don't get some guy able to sit on the radio and say what he likes to say. I get some listeners from Ukraine. I get to know where they come from on my internationalflavor.com listening. And I get some from Ukraine, but it's a lower amount. I get a good amount from Russia, even on my English speaking channel, and I get and I get a decent amount in the United States. Well, and other countries too. It breaks them all down for you. And so it's kind of cool to get that sort of listenership off of my damn radio platform here. But the sampling numbers are important in certain countries, lots of countries. Now, in America, we allegedly have it extremely good because we have freedom of speech. Now, I'll fight for that all day, every day, to say exactly what I want without filter, without somebody determining what's going to be said to me, or what I get to say, or how I think. I think it's important to have a cross pattern of sampling for when you're going to take polls and stuff. People need information. If you don't have information, you can't have a good poll. And in Ukraine, they aren't getting any information. First of all, everything is bombed, everyone, and so they get cut off. Second of all, the government controls what they say and what they, try, which means they can control what you think. Now, U.S. Agency for International Development helped in that regard quite a bit because they pay for the platforms that they wish to send out their bile, their crap to everybody on the planet, and to fix these, to focus how people believe. And it's been how many years now? It's been going on. The Victoria Newlands of the world get to go in and help that crap, and finger puppet a country from behind the scenes by dangling huge amounts of money to them. That is what's going on. So when you take these polls that they have conducted that are, let me see if I can find the tail of this story, because it's important. It's an interesting story. There's so many. Lavrov had an hour and a half interview yesterday. Let's see. He said that the U.S. suppresses competitors with dirty methods, tariffs, stuff like that. Now, I don't necessarily believe in that. Allegedly, the U.S. has issued an ultimatum to Teen. But I want to find this poll. Where is the damn poll? Hello, how's the family? I didn't find it. Wherever it is. But in the last couple of days, and then the story is basically this: that 61% in this poll of 560 people said that 61% of them still support the Z monster, and they weren't all that jazzed up about having elections. Okay, so what has the government of Ukraine been doing ever since? Well, forever, but especially since 2025, May the 24th or whatever that day was, when the Z-Man was supposed to have elections, and he canceled them and put in, and that was 2024, by the way, so it's 18 plus months, and he canceled elections both for him and the parliament. So all the same a-holes are in there. They're untouchable completely because they aren't answerable to the people because of the regime and how it's done it. And you see what the corruption has done and the huge amounts of corruption. So what they have done is they have continued to push pro-Z-Man stories. And now that they have blame stories, the trust in the United States, okay, is down to 10%, according to this poll. And a short year and a half ago, under the Biden administration, it was 40+% of trust for the U.S. So even then, it wasn't all that high. It certainly wasn't over the half the people point. But 559 is a small sampling size, but if they say that less than or approximately 10% of those, think about that. That's only 50 people who have trust in what the United States is doing. So I guarantee you that Ukrainian sources are, and they're all out pumping this crap that you can't trust the United States. Well, that's a common theme everywhere. This common theme, it's what I tell you, that's what Russia says, that's what India says, that's what China says, that's what all the third developing nations, the global south, they like to call it. Those people don't trust us, and they're creating alternatives, as I was saying yesterday. They're creating financial alternatives because the people, the globalists that control the means of finance and everything else in the West, these globalist a-holes have to control you through the use of sanctions, through the use of whatever. And when people see that, as we discussed yesterday, they back off from where where people are supposed, where you would normally go. They certainly don't trust you. The ceasefire, the word ceasefire is thrown around in the West like it's the end of the war, okay, like it's the end. In Russia, they're going, nah, we ain't going with any simple ceasefire. And by the way, this makes sense. It's not anything that you should be think is strange, because Russia says, no, we don't want just a ceasefire. We want an end, and we're not stopping until the end is here. We're not going to give you a 30-day ceasefire and allow you to do this. We've been through this before, right? And it, you can agree or disagree, but it's a valid argument. Okay, it's like I was involved in since I work at Civic Outlaws and I work at Modern Law Ecosystem. We're involved in some fairly interesting getting of information against government overreach, sunshine requests, stuff like that. And there's a fairly big one pending right now that the law is changing people, and agencies and bureaucrats need to be scared. They really do, because I'm coming, and I don't stop. And I'm not saying I'm always right. I'm not, but at least have your opinions and answer your questions, and quit taking power that doesn't belong to you. And that's what they do. Agencies do it, and there's been some massive changes. And I do plan on doing a full legal discussion of this issue, but I kind of don't want to do it until we receive the ruling that the court is going to give us. There's some big things going on because of this that are there. Well, when the government controls everything, it's very hard to get a voice. I don't know. I mean, one day I should do something on what's called what do you call it? Qualified immunity on the federal level and official immunity on the state level, because it is a nightmare. It means that you can't go after the state. You know, comes back all the way back from when kings ruled the planet, and you can't sue the king. You know, if the king said something, one of the king's word was final. That's that. And you don't get to sue anybody. What are you going to sue me? I'm the king. Well, the governments have gone that way. You cannot sue the government in the United States unless the government has allowed you to sue the government. And so there are very, very, very small exceptions to do a run around, and it usually comes when people are taking power that doesn't belong to them. And that is when you can sometimes get past this qualified immunity. When a police officer, for example, isn't doing the job he was designed to do. If he's a corrupt policeman, like one of the first cases I ever did in this back in 2003, 20-something years ago, was going after a corrupt cop. And that is simple. You're past. Cops aren't allowed to be corrupt. They're not allowed to plant evidence. And if you have good evidence or good discussion that they have gone outside of their regular job and are doing something that is not permitted, then you can get them. But even then, there's a huge tendency in federal courts to sweep it under the rug and allow them to get away with it. Shooting people, filling them with 25 holes, and then claiming, well, gee, he had a gun in the truck, and you Swiss cheesed him and his truck because there was a gun inside. Often they get away with that crap. And that is unfortunate, but that is the world we live in, because doing your job includes blowing people away if they got a gun, because they're a danger to themselves, to the community, to the officers. And all the officer has to do is get on the stand and cry and say, oh, geez, I was in fear of my life. And then they're okay, right? So they get on, that's how it works. And it's hard to get past that. And so you got to gather your evidence before you go after the person, and make sure you can get past that very high hurdle. Okay. And in the state of Missouri, they have something called official immunity, which has a similar hurdle on the state law side. They call it official. But you got to get past both of those if you want to get a state and a federal claim. Anyway, that has nothing to do with our tale today and the things we're going through today. But it does have something to do with suing the government and with the government overreach that is a continual theme, not only of my show, but of several shows on this station. Okay, I was extremely interested when Ike was talking about the cameras, because I did cameras too. I went after those idiotic cameras too years ago. I think somebody ought to sue Flock here. And frankly, I haven't followed up on the Virginia case in Richmond, Virginia, that they were suing Flock. I haven't followed up on that for a while. I might have to dig back into that, because it'd be really interesting to start a case like that here in the Lake area, maybe from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you know what you can do. If you have issues of government overreach, if you want to talk about a government overreach, I'm the guy to talk about it with. And you can give me we have Civic Outlaws is a charitable organization. You can get on our civicoutlaws.com site, and you can tell your story. Little blurb. The website's not done yet, but it's well on its way. And the same thing with Modern Law Ecosystem. We're building an ecosystem of all over the country of people that are involved in the legal process. Paralegals, court reporters, site investigators, process servers, attorneys, accident reconstructionists, chiropractors, to get in there and have a source of managing all of the entire matter. We also give consultations, sometimes with a lawyer, sometimes not. We have a lot of lawyers that are associated with us, and you don't always need a lawyer. Sometimes you want to do something on your own. Well, you can come through us to do that kind of thing. It's at Modern Law Ecosystem. And if it's one that's going after the government, Civic Outlaws might pick it up and do a lot of the legwork for you. So we will happily discuss your issues And, that is the nature of what we're doing. And it's going to be huge. And but it's not yet, but it's well on its way, friends and neighbors. And we got some things coming up that are going to be a pretty freaking, what do you call it? Forward thinking, let's call it, and against government overreach. Okay, we are one thing we're united upon. We might not have the same opinions on what you think of Ukraine or what you think of the old Trumpster, destroying people in boats in Venezuela or stealing their tankers. I disagree with all that. I am one of those persons. I try to still believe in the law, even though the law is extremely flawed. Okay, and making an excuse to get there. I don't like the excuse that is being used to get into the Venezuela issue, and it's depressing to me that we are in that process where we kill people, and people go, "Yeah, they were part of the drug thing." Well, yeah. How would you like to be destroyed by the king, hung by the king, because you stole a deer from Sherwood Forest? Because you were, committing a crime against the realm, okay? And so the crime against the realm with no defense, the realm isn't much of a realm, is it? And that's the unfortunate thought process that I have when I see people getting blown out of the water and justifying it by some guy going, well, narco-terror, screw them, they deserved it. Well, people deserve a lot of things. Who's the guy and where's the we're better people than that sort of thing. They're taking a life is an extremely is something you sure should think about before you freaking do it. And doing it for a reason like that when you're not in imminent danger. I've never killed a person. I've never done it. I've never pushed a button and blown up a boat. I'm not sure that I would if I was sitting there and somebody goes, well, launch that missile trap, take out that boat. I'm telling you, I'm not so sure I'd do it. I'd say, and I'm not, I hate to be one of those, what did they call us when you could get out of the draft? If you wanted to get out of the draft long ago, you had to move to Canada or say, I am a conscientious objector. I object to this kind of thing. You do realize that's not allowed in Ukraine right now. You can't object to, you just look, I don't kill people. Basically, if you send me to the front lines, you're sending me to my death because I don't want to kill anybody. Now, if somebody's killing you, and killing your people, I can agree to that sort of thing. Imminently, declarations of war, doing things like that. We haven't done that. We haven't done that in Venezuela, and we haven't. And so I'm all over the map today, and I really apologize for that. But I'm just freewheeling, freebasing, whatever they call it, just babbling like I am want to do. And I would like to get to a bunch of these stories that I have, but I wanted to finish because I have to come back around to these polling numbers. And what happens in polling numbers? You poll me. Nobody's ever polled me in the United States. I've never gotten a call from a poll. Of course, I never take robocalls, and that's the way they're done anymore. And it'd be nice to get a real person call. And that's the problem, is people that have things to do in their lives aren't able to answer the telephone, and give an opinion. That skews your numbers too, doesn't it? So in Ukraine, 10% of the people are believing in the U.S. Still being a valid partner. 20%, that's it, still believe in NATO doing the right thing for Ukraine. Now, those numbers were vastly different. I was a little surprised by the Z-Monster numbers still being over 61. When he won election, he was something like between 70 and 80%. 72, I think, but I don't remember. And now, allegedly, with his 559 people who are still at home and can answer the phone, they got a 61% margin for him for being, a still positive thought process about him. Well, if that's the case, then he shouldn't have any problem conducting elections. Isn't that true? Wouldn't there be an a way to conduct elections. There's been, a lot of discussion about that, about Trump forcing the peace process upon the Z monster. Washington is pressuring Kiev to cede the territory that Moscow has already taken, at least the 3 of the 5 oblasts. Because remember, they have taken the Donbass, which consists of Donetsk and Lugansk. They took Crimea back in 2014. Well, they had referendums in all 3 of those places, and the referendums were in the favor of Russia and wanting to join Russia constitutionally. And the same thing happened in Zaporizhia and Kherson. And so those 5 territories, the U.S. has informed Ukraine, according to the Wall Street Journal, that they are unwilling to compromise. They're pressuring Kiev to cede this territory to Moscow, but Zelensky just ruled it out. And so U.S. negotiators are unwilling to compromise with Ukrainian counterparts over the roadmap to peace proposed by the old Trumpster, says the Wall Street Journal. On Sunday, the outlet quoted its anonymous source, it's always anonymous, as describing the talks between the U.S. and Ukraine in Berlin that day as difficult. According to the publication, negotiations have turned into a tug of war between Washington and Kiev. Washington's pushing for decisions quickly with the view of ending the Ukrainian conflict by the end of the year. Wouldn't that be a great Christmas present for the Ukrainians? It really would. And the main bone of contention is the issue of territory. Says the Wall Street Journal, says that Kiev rejects Washington's call to withdraw its troops from parts of Russian Donetsk, People's Republic Ukraine still occupies. So, Donetsk and Lugansk. Russia already occupies 98% of Lugansk. Donetsk, there's a little bit further to go. And Zaporizhia, there's plenty more to go. They're well over 80% in Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Donetsk. And so what they're pressuring is to take Donetsk and Lugansk. I can't imagine that the Russians would back out of Zaporizhia or Kherson. I doubt it. I'm surprised so far that they haven't gone into Mykolaiv and Odessa regions, and that's ultimately going to happen if this continues. Because now, as I report, the front is moving, and far more quickly than it was before. There's an article that says desertions have gone up, and they are now at 300,000 nearly. Okay, between desertions, between people who have run. There's a guy who took a motorcycle run at the blockade to cross the border from Ukraine into Romania, and he didn't make it. But it was a valiant effort using his late 30s, and he's in the age. So sent to the front, and there's a guy who didn't want to fight, and he got tackled by one of the guards at the and it's just one of those arms that goes up and down, and the arm is there. And on the Ukrainian side, so when you cross a border like that on a road, there are actually 2 places you got to cross. You got to cross the exit point of the country you're leaving, and then you got to go through the entry point of the country you're coming to. So he got caught at the exit point into Ukraine. There are people that they estimate that several hundred, 300-400 people have died trying to make the crossing to escape in the mountainous territories in places that are just dangerous. You're climbing cliffs and whatnot to get to another country. People are dying trying to avoid the war. Because they're all being, sent straight to the front. There's no training. Your unit is training you, when you get thrown to the front. These are big deals, And the country, I think, it needs to be saved from itself. If they still believe the Z monster, now, I don't like that. It's not our job to save them from itself. But the way you do it is, I can accept if we just cut them off. We quit funding it. The funding is what's kicking the crap out of them. The EU has a 20% love-hate, sort of ratio with Ukraine. 20% for the EU. And a lot of people still have EU desires. Oh, geez, we want to be European and not Slavic. That's a BS argument anyway. You know, why can't you be like Belarus, which has a bit of an eye both directions? It's really crappy when you go to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and I've only been to Lithuania, so I shouldn't say with the other two, but allegedly they're all identical, and they hate Russia so much you can't even say a word in Russian, which it's BS, and it's a function of what they have heard or what their parents told them about when the collapse of the Soviet Union occurred, because it's a different generation, and this hatred of other people is really quite the creation of what we talked about yesterday, the creation of memes and of war by the fake flag. If you haven't seen it, you should listen to. Where's the Scott Ritter had a show yesterday that I watched that had the flag on it. And so what happened in this flag? Where is that? I mean, it's a joke. The old Z monster, allegedly, it went to this place in Seversk, right? And took a video. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. Took a video, and oh, geez, here I am on the front line. Russians are full of crap. They're saying that we have lost Seversk and that they occupy this place. But here I am. Look at me, the brave green goblin, standing in Seversk, and let me take a selfie for you. And here I am taking a selfie. It's AI generated, all of it. Scott Ritter talks about it on this program and showed the videos, because several days later, some Ukrainian journalists went to Seversk and go, man, let's go check it out. Apparently we still own Seversk, and they go down there and they took a video from the same spot. It's not remotely similar. When Z Monster was there, he had video that showed, a Ukrainian flag, showed all this buildings in fine condition and whatnot. And then the reality hit a few days later. Where do you hear that in the United States? Seriously, you got to hunt it down to find it. You got to go hunt it. Ukrainians aren't hearing that. Ukrainians won't see it unless they have VPN access somehow. But all of that is being, destroyed. And Americans don't go find it. The support for Ukraine is still far greater than it ought to be. And I don't mean not support Ukraine. I support Ukraine. I think Ukraine should be a separate state. I think they should pull their heads out of their asses and live in a world where people get along, and you don't target another culture just because it's the culture. That's nonsense. And that's absolutely what has been going on at least 30 years, all the way through. And each one of the leaders that have been there, and especially since the Western-driven coup in 2014, where we were engaging in regime change, and we changed the playing field in 2014, especially since then, when we funded anti-Russia, anti-this through, and I say we, sorry, JR, shouldn't say we should say the globalist idiots of the planet funded anti-Russia rhetoric. And Russia, what they have been pushing for steadily, calmly, thoughtfully, I've told you this a million times, Lavrov and Putin and Peskov, Zakharova is funny, but all of these people, they say the same things. Look, we want to be a part of the world. That's what we want. We want you to live in the way that you choose to live, and let us live in the way that we choose to live because we like it. This is how we wish to live. Don't go targeting us for regime change like you have in Ukraine, like you're trying to do in Venezuela, Syria, Iraq. I mean, name it, everywhere. Just to have the same rules apply to everybody. And we are finished asking. We are done asking. You don't get to put NATO on our borders. Lavrov did a show in his interview. Where is this? Because this I did want to include with you. Let's see. Russia is offering education. Ukraine's a black hole swallowing billions of euros. There's a title for you. The EU rolls up its clown car to rob a bank for Ukraine. I'm going to share that whole thing with you. Western Europe is boycotting Ukrainian peace process. The EU will not succeed, according to the Italian prime minister, where Hitler and Napoleon both failed. How do you like that? Trump sued the BBC for 200 million, whatever it was. Where is it? Kiev has already lost, according to Trump. Here it is. Lavrov. The German reunification. Okay. They're going back this way. German reunification was a takeover. So the Soviet Union betrayed their East German colleagues and its own interests by trusting Western promises. And I don't know if you remember the history of this, but it's in this article, so I'm going to share it with you. And it's not all there, but that was an interesting history in itself. When Mikhail Gorbachev was agreed to the unification of the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic, after receiving assurances, no treaty, received assurances that NATO would not expand further eastward. Those promises were later broken. And here's what Lavrov said. This was a mistake and a betrayal on the part of the Soviet Union when almost 500,000 Soviet troops were withdrawn with no compensation and the opportunity to maintain their presence in the eastern part of the United Germany was ignored. He said that the Western authorities mishandled the integration of the former German Democratic Republic. The authorities of what was then West Germany made a grave mistake when, after taking the eastern part, they treated their compatriots as second-class people. They did. And the German authorities, as conquerors, took all the lands of the former GDR under their control, got rid of all the political figures. No future was offered them at all. It was a takeover, not a merger. And Berlin is now among the strongest advocates in the EU's militarization drive, which the bloc's leaders justify by claiming the need to prepare for a possible Russian attack. Moscow says this is designed to intimidate the public, suppress dissent amid domestic political failure. Lavrov also cited recent statements by Friedrich Merz, the current chancellor, calling some of them blatantly racist and reminiscent of the Nazi era. The DNA that runs in his family is still there, said Lavrov. He took a poke at Merz. He said because he was referring to Merz's maternal grandfather, a guy named Joseph Paul Savigny, whose historical records describe as an enthusiastic Nazi Party member. This is about contempt, arrogance, and I can go as far as to call this an attitude of a person pretending to represent a superior race, said Lavrov. Those are quotes. So he's saying that the assurances, the reason I wanted to bring that story up is because he said that, the issue when they tricked, because this is trust, this is betrayal, when Mikhail Gorbachev agreed as the prime minister, chairman, he agreed to allow East Germany to merge with West Germany. He was assured by Bush II, I believe it was, or Bush I, that NATO would not go an inch to the first. Those are just assurances. No treaty, no nothing. Now, Russians remember that. And now, 9 times, 16 times, something like that, NATO has expanded after that. They're all the way into Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden, Norway, all of these places are right on the borders. And they were promised, assurance is a promise, that, nope, we're not going to go any further. But guess what they did? They've gone further, and now they're still going further, still wish to go further. And, nobody's interested in the Russia and promises made because the globalist West does not keep its promises. It just doesn't. And, Trump recognizes part of this. And he also recognized, he said, when did this article? He said on the 15th, which was yesterday, Ukraine peace deal is closer than ever, he said. And he said that he had a very good conversation with European leaders and spoke directly with Vladimir Putin recently as part of the efforts to get all sides on the same page. Last month, Trump put a framework for a peace plan. Remember those 28 points we talked about? That this proposal, which has since been revised multiple times, sees Kiev renouncing NATO aspiration, as well as claims to Crimea and Donbass, the regions of Lugansk and Donetsk, all of which joined Russia after referendums. In return, it would receive unspecified security guarantees. Asked Monday what the incentive was for Ukraine to back out of the territory, Trump suggested it might already be settled. And the quote is great because, it's not. This is absolutely true. What do they expect? And Trump says, well, they've already lost the territory, to be honest. I mean, the territory is lost. He's talking reality. People don't want to hear reality. They want to hear platitudes. When they go, well, we'll kick those Russians right back to Belgorod. We'll get rid of them. We'll send them back into Tatarstan. We'll push them back, away over the Azov Sea. They'll be gone. And that's not the case. That's not going to happen. And he told reporters at the White House, but in terms of security guarantees, we're working on security guarantees so the war doesn't start up again. Trump said he recently held talks with Putin, believes Russia is serious. At this moment, Russia wants to get it ended. And the problem is they'll want to get it ended, and then all of a sudden they won't. Well, that's because you don't listen. When you went to Alaska and was told at that time, remember him coming out of those meetings, and then for the next couple of days, he was talking, not ceasefire, he was talking finalization of a peace. Not just a ceasefire. He was told directly that, nope, a ceasefire isn't going to cut it because 30 days from now, the war will start up again. You'll have refunded and resupplied the Ukrainians, and the war will continue. We are not playing that. We want a final, complete resolution and agreement before we agree to anything. Until that time, we're still running. Meanwhile, desertions are way up in the last 2 months in Ukraine. Like I told you, they're well over 290,000. 290,000 people are leaving. I heard a number yesterday that I don't believe because it's double that. Trump said yesterday that they lost 25,000 in the last month. It's been more than that. It's been more than that. And he said Ukraine will want to get it ended, and then all of a sudden they won't. So we have to get everyone on the same page. And following the talks in Berlin Monday between Trump and Witkoff, or the envoys, Witkoff and Kushner and the Ukrainian delegation, Trump said he had a good conversation with European and NATO leaders, as well as the old Z monster. We had very long and good talks. I think things are going pretty well. Z-Man says, however, after the meeting that some progress had been made, but the issue of concessions is definitely not relevant. He floated the idea of a referendum on territorial concession, but insisted that Western security guarantees be secured beforehand, along with holding a long-delayed presidential election. I say, as does Moscow, that is just a ploy to prolong the conflict, because he knows nobody will do it. He knows Russia won't agree to Western troops, NATO troops being in anywhere in Ukraine. And all they want to do is prolong the conflict to regroup the military. Russia consistently says that Crimea and Donbass, which Donbass voted to join the Russian Federation in 2022, are its territories. and Ukrainian troops will be pushed out of the region one way or the other. And that is well underway, even now. And there's very little to get there. And meanwhile, the idiots in NATO are still pushing to try to send troops to Ukraine. The EU and UK expect the U.S. to support this multinational force. You know, this is. Remember when the old Obama monster said, the old Bominator that I called him, the Obaminator said, I'll have a little more flexibility, told that to Putin so long ago. And, remember when he told Mitt Romney, hey, the 80s are calling, they want their foreign policy back. That's what multinational peace forces are. Russia ain't going to put up with that. You might get away with that in a place like Syria or Iraq where you dominate the field. You're not going to get away with that in where Russia dominates. They will stand up. They will push back, and it'll never happen. You won't have multinational forces in Ukraine without starting World War III. And that's what'll happen. Because then, right now, people aren't being forced to choose a side. Not yet. But if this continues, it's got to. There is a big danger, of this escalation, and the idiots in Europe know the only way to win is to. They can't win. They've already lost. U.S. recognizes this. Donald Trump recognizes this. Europeans are going, wait a minute. If you were Joe Biden, well, you'd still be paying for this crap. You'd still be funding it all. You would have never forced us to 5%. We're preparing for war, but we won't be ready till 2030. So in the meantime, U.S., you got to fight it. We got to keep these Ukrainians dying for us in the meantime so that we win. Ultimately, we're globalists and we have to win. And the only way to win is delay, delay, delay. Give us a ceasefire. Blame everything on Russia like we've been doing. And hopefully, put multinational forces in there, and we'll claim that Russia broke this and broke that, just like we've always been, because this is a war of propaganda, at least in the globalist West elite, right? But on the talks, Steve Witkoff, the leaders of Germany, France, UK, and 8 other nations, along with officials from Brussels, issued a joint statement proposing robust security guarantees for Kiev. This would include commitments to a European-led multinational force, Ukraine, made up of contributions from willing nations, the Coalition of the Willing, within the framework of the Coalition of the Willing, and supported by the U.S. It will assist in the regeneration of Ukraine's forces, in securing Ukraine's skies, and in supporting a safer sea lanes, including through operating inside of Ukraine, the document states. The UK and France have long pushed the idea of European troops in Ukraine once a ceasefire is agreed upon, although it is unclear which nations would actually contribute forces. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk immediately rejected this plan, saying his country needs all its troops at home to defend the eastern flank of NATO. That guy's an idiot, too. But that's a good argument to not send your people to Ukraine. Italy also consistently rejects sending Italian forces to Ukraine. Moscow rejects the idea completely because NATO forces in Ukraine won't be allowed under any pretext. And they insist that Kiev would use the pause in fighting to rearm, regroup, rebuild its military back up to 1 million. Hope, for them. I don't think they can do it anyway. Russia continues to push for permanent peace, not these ceasefire BSs, some permanent peace that addresses conflict's root cause. Another provision in the European plan calls for a U.S.-led ceasefire monitoring and verification mechanism. The U.S., right? As if, we get to control that, right? The signatories seek a legally binding commitment Yeah? What about Minsk 1? What about Minsk 2? Where are those legally binding commitments that everybody did? Why? They admitted to do this to give Ukraine more time to build an army to attack Russia. That's what it was. Subject to national procedures, this binding commitment to support Kiev with armed force, intelligence and logistical assistance, economic and diplomatic actions. How's that any different than what has been done for the past at least 11, 12 years, and probably the whole 32 or whatever it is that Ukraine has been in existence? Huh? How is it any different? So this coalition of the willing is going, wait. We're losing. This ain't right. We're losing. And how do we save face and claim that we're not losing? We put a multinational NATO force led by the United States, who was all over Ukraine before this started. Hell, there's probably still U.S., trainers and advisors or whatever you want to call them, whether they're mercenary type, whether they are contractor type, or whether they're really in have been assigned there by the U.S. government, by the military. They're still there. They are there. And there was an article I read last week that said that they took a bunch of special forces guys on the Russian side, and they are currently in custody. They have surrendered, captured, whatever you want to put it. But I haven't seen anything in the West on that. Only saw that in the East, which doesn't surprise me because the news is always quite different. Zelensky said on Monday that Kiev's not going to recognize the Donbass as Russian, neither de jure nor de facto. Not for today, and not because they already occupy it, basically. And other European proposals include significant support to Ukraine to build its armed forces. They want to rebuild it. They still are trying to suck them into this NATO light, I guess. I don't know. There's been talk about Trump giving some kind of Article 5 protections to Ukraine outside of NATO. Well, that's going to be unacceptable too. I think this war is only going to end by capitulation. And that capitulation, sadly, could be another 3 to 5 years. I was watching a military summary channel, and on the next, so I was telling you the other day about how you cross the plains and you come to a couple of cities. Seversk is one of them. The cities of Pokrovsk and Mirgorod are another, a little bit south of that. And there's one more in between there. And that after that, you have nothing but flat plains for quite a while. And the jump of, once Russia gets past these trench parts that the Ukrainians built back in 2020 as a last defense or whatever, once they get past those, and they already crossed this other river that I forget the name of. I don't remember the name of it. I'm going to look here for a second. And they, this river, I forget the name of, Oskol or something like that. I don't remember. But once they cross that river, which they have in 3 points already, and so they're gonna, now they control 3 parts of that river, and once they cross it completely, it's a run all the way to Zaporizhia, great big city, 1 million people on the banks of the Donetsk River, and they consider, a lot of people consider, and I said this several years ago, a lot of people consider east of that river to be Slavic, west of that river to be European. Okay, that's the way it's been. Now history, Kiev is on that river further north, right? And but if they get to Zaporizhia, there's been talks that Zaporizhia within the next 6 months will be Russian. That's a big deal. And that is the western, I believe, border of Zaporizhia, the oblast, the region. And but 1 million people, at least pre-war. And it's still standing. It's still nice. There's been takeout of some of the infrastructure, electricity, grids, stuff like that. And so there's still things there. But the talk is right now with 300,000 desertions, with the inability to resupply new soldiers, stuff like that, that it's very likely that Russia in the next 6 months, 9 months will be in Zaporizhia. They've already taken Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, Seversk, and one other city. I forget the name of it. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. The city, and once they get there, it's just farmland west of there. Small villages, small stuff, and they'll just roll through there relatively quickly. Now, Russia is moving. And incrementally, they're doing it on purpose, and everybody's talking, and they don't lose as many men the way they are doing it. It's not an all-out Anschluss, a big, Panzer Blitz, with all these tanks running across and taking the cities of Belgorod back in the 45. That's not what's going on. Russia is doing incremental advances and doing a very good job of it. And are they losing men? Absolutely. Are they losing? There's a lot of infantry. That they are losing, and they have some heavy losses too, manpower wise. But they are churning and steadily moving forward. And the loss of 4 large cities in the last 4 to 6 months is a big deal. And taking of Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, Seversk, and whatever the other one is a big deal. And there's been other reasonably good-sized territories that have been taken, and the combination of it all means this is bad. And Europeans trying to say that this isn't the case. Zelensky trying to say this isn't the case. Here's my AI video of me standing in Seversk when he knows that Seversk is gone. It's only done for Western propaganda. No, those Russians are liars. All you got to do is find out that it's AI generated. He can't even post that thing on his Instagram without a geolocation. He's got to put a geolocation. He can't do it because it's not, they can tell whether it's fake and generated, and that's exactly what they did. And it is completely fake. So Zelensky is just like all the rest, and all the rest of the corrupt a-holes that are just taking our money and lining their pocket, taking our government's money and lining their pockets. Let's see. I already told you about German reunification. Here it is. Here's the poll. Let's see if I got the numbers right. I found the poll. Ukrainians' trust in NATO has collapsed. 550 citizens. The survey says that the trust in NATO is only 34%, and it was 44% last year. The public trust in the U.S. had an even steeper drop. Here are the numbers. I got those incorrect, so let's make sure they're right. 21% was 41% last year. And the poll suggests Ukrainians are ready to withstand the conflict as long as necessary, with some 62% responding affirmatively to this question, indicated that confidence in the Z-monster is relatively high at around 61%. And get this, I forgot about this one. This is interesting. Only 9% of the respondents said that presidential elections need to be held as soon as possible, while others argued they should only happen when the conflict with Russia is over. Isn't that crazy? So they're believers, apparently, and that's loopy. I already told you about the unwillingness to compromise. I wanted to talk about Euroclear. Where's that article? Because that's important. Here you go. Moscow court. So they filed in Moscow. with the seizure or this EU thing over the weekend to indefinitely seize. I told you a little bit about this yesterday. Indefinitely hold, indefinitely block access to whatever they want to use as the terms of the day for stealing money from Russia and giving it to Ukraine. Moscow has sued Euroclear, Belgium's Euroclear, and this is a bad deal no matter how you slice it. And the impact is going to be felt by Euroclear because there's still legal processes you have to get through. And the EU is ignoring them, and the EU is wrong from a legal standpoint. They can't do it under the articles of the EU, in fact. They can't do what they are doing, but they have anyway. They changed it from a unanimous vote to a majority of people. And so Russia's central bank sued Euroclear, seeking damages over the sovereign. Like, sovereign means country owned. They're owned by the country. A Moscow court has agreed to hear the $230 billion lawsuit filed by Central Bank of Russia against Euroclear over the immobilization of Russia's assets. And last week, the CBR, Central Bank of Russia, initiated legal proceedings against the depository, and a depository is not really a bank, it's a depository, that holds the bulk of its frozen assets after the EU announced it would keep the funds temporarily immobilized using its emergency powers. Now, Moscow condemns that freeze as illegal, as do I, and called any use of the funds theft. Well, if they immobilize them, that's one crime. Giving them to Ukraine, that's another. And I believe they've already conducted them by giving the interest off of those assets to Ukraine, which they've done, or seizing it and playing legal shenanigans and games to keep that money. We talked about that yesterday. You know, you're not part of the club. You got to be part of the club. You know, if you're not part of the club, screw you. This is basically what's happened. But a Moscow arbitration court says the lawsuit was registered on Friday, or shows that the lawsuit was registered on Friday. The claim exceeds 18 trillion rubles, $230 billion. According to the Business Daily, the regulator reportedly plans to seek a closed hearing, and any ruling would apply within respective jurisdictions, with proceedings in Russia separate from any dispute in the EU or a third country court, with enforcement depending upon where assets and counterparties are located. So Russia's doing this to seize money inside of Russia held by Euroclear for other countries. Western countries, Western-dominated countries, globalist countries that have been part of this effort to steal Russia's $230 billion. They're going to win, you know, in Moscow. You'd say they're not. A judgment against Euroclear, it could actually be enforced according to international clearinghouse rules. They could be enforced anywhere. So this is a smart move legally, you know, for Russia. It carries risks of reputation damage. Naturally, their reputation is destroyed already because everybody knows you got to put your money somewhere else. I'm telling you, people are hedging and pulling money out of there right now. I guarantee it. And that is what Belgium is afraid of, is that their, you know, sovereign nations won't keep money in Euroclear. They're all buying gold and keeping it somewhere else, and they're sucking it out of Europe. So the decline of Europe continues because they are no longer the big bad, clearinghouse for international trade of the euro. And just like the U.S. and the dollar, we're subject to the same thing because people are sucking them away. Sanctions are not a pal to the rest of the world. They don't just impact Russia. They impact financial systems all over, okay? So a judgment carries the risk of also potentially leading to bankruptcy of Euroclear if other countries continue to withdraw funds. Euroclear said it complies with EU sanctions, acts in line with binding legal requirements in jurisdictions where it operates. Not so sure that's going to be true here because last week the EU immobilized Russia's assets invoking Article 122, an emergency treaty clause that allows approval by a qualified majority rather than unanimity. European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen proposes using the funds to back loans to Ukraine. But legal experts say the clause was never meant, Article 122, to fund wars or to seize foreign assets, but only for economic emergencies in the bloc. Here it is. Freezing the third country's sovereign reserves, by definition, is a restrictive measure governed by Article 215, not 122. This requires unanimity, according to law professor Christina Van Bergen, who calls it a legal and political misstep to seize Russia's money or to continue to hold it. And Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban accuses EU of raping European law in broad daylight, is what he said. And he called the move to bypass his country's veto a declaration of war. Now, that's scary. People should take that seriously. So far, they are not. International financial institutions, including the European Central Bank and the IMF, gee, there's a bunch of geniuses, have cautioned that using immobilized sovereign assets will undermine confidence in the euro. Yep. And I'm telling you, this is a huge deal. Why is it this could tell about things to come. This is only the first move in what's going to be a long chess game about this money. And I'm telling you, I'm going to keep an eye on it because this is huge. It's very huge. And I think it's something that is completely wrong. And it, how do we want to put it? It's like a bad plot. It's a bad plot in a play. Here's the bad guys taking all the stuff, and will the good guy win or will he not? So the central bank announced its lawsuit in arbitration court. That's important. And the Euroclear has around the $220 billion is held there. That's the largest part of Russia's money is held in Euroclear. And so this announcement was made in a press conference, no commentary. They just put it out there and didn't say what the legal consequences were. I've had to look to find some, right, and figure out where it went. And this the timing though is not an accident. They did it right after the EU expected, we expected anyway, those of us who pay attention to this thing, expected them to continue to attempt to steal this money. And so the timing's no surprise. It came right after this contentious plan to tap those assets for a zero-interest loan to Ukraine, right? And this play is coming to a conclusion, right? And the move by the bank, a legal step with no fanfare. This is an interesting part of the article because it's true. With no fanfare, not broadcasting it everywhere, not, hey, we're going to get you a-holes, none of that. It's just a little press release. That's it. That's typical for Moscow. They tend not to front-run complicated policy endeavors over social media. Now, that's a slap at everywhere in the West because we govern by social media. We govern by Instagram, by X, by Truth Social is how we put stuff out to try. And don't think it's not a politics and a propaganda game, because that's exactly what it is. You need to get your facts from other places, people like me, people like JR, who dig a little bit further into it than just, oh, gee, here's what somebody said on X. We get you more. We get you statements from people. And they don't, but Russia typically does not do it in social media or through provocative public statements. So far, they tend to put, just the facts, just the facts, please. We, the government, including the central bank, are doing everything to protect our assets, said Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak. You ever heard that name before? I have not. He's a lower level guy. in the deputy prime minister's office. He said illegal confiscation is unacceptable. Western observers, accustomed to acrimonious and public policy implementations in their own countries, may be puzzled by Russian officials' reluctance to spell out potential implications, but the signal is clear. Russia has moved to the realm of action with regard to protecting its interests. The threat of Russian retaliation has hung over the entire EU-led asset theft episode like the sword of Damocles, says this author. But now an opening shot has been fired. At face value, the lawsuit against Euroclear in Moscow doesn't mean a whole lot. The Russian central bank will almost certainly win in Moscow, and Euroclear probably won't even mount a defense in a Russian jurisdiction. Russia's legal case is widely seen as strong, even if you disregard their home field advantage. Absolutely true. For both Euroclear and the EU, the risk is far greater than whatever amount they could look to be on the hook for in light of a potential Russian court ruling. If Russia's legal case spills into other jurisdictions, which it will, messy and protracted litigation will be extremely damaging for Euroclear, not to mention for the EU's reputation globally and its own investment climate. And Ursula's clown car she's an idiot, for pushing this, and they're gonna lose. Many advocates of this seizure plan, they point out that Russia can hardly be expected to win a lawsuit in an EU jurisdiction. So if they went to Brussels and filed suit, somebody'd figure out a way to screw them, because that's how the system works. How the system works here too. You pick your jurisdiction where you're going to win. So Russia filed in Russia because they're going to win, and then they can try to enforce it in other places. But even more importantly, they can enforce it inside of Russia. So the battleground is elsewhere. If Russia is able to secure an injunction in a neutral country where Euroclear operates, Viktor Orban, Hungary, pick it. Euroclear has offices all over the place, and Russia has friends all over the place, and they could enforce it in other places and take the money from other places. This is a big international law deal, right? It could create extreme logistics difficulties and tremendous reputational risk for Euroclear. Euroclear, by its own admission, is holding client assets amounting to around $16 billion in Russia. Those funds Russia has already frozen. So of the 230 of Russia in return froze $16 billion. So it's only 214, right? But a worse fate could await if Russia were to retaliate. Friday's announcement of the lawsuit made no mention of those funds and whether further action would be taken with regard to them. But the announcement didn't need to discuss that. The implication is quite clear. Euroclear CEO Valerie Urbain has also made reference to those funds, and she admits that she fears that Russia will take them. She has generally been outspoken in her own opposition to the loan scheme and has warned that her company would face bankruptcy if sanctions against Russia are lifted, but Europe has stolen this money and put it elsewhere. Of course, given Euroclear's central role in the financial system, the EU would step in. And it is true that the EU has invoked this emergency, Article 122, that keeps the Russian funds immobilized indefinitely to hedge against sudden removal of sanctions. So if the sanctions are gone, Russia could get their money back. If the U.S. lifted sanctions, Russia can have their money. So, and if that happened, that would screw this Euroclear, I'm stealing your money deal, and giving it to Ukraine as a loan, right? Which will never be paid back. They'll just forgive it, right? But this doesn't alleviate the risk that an agreement to end the war wouldn't facilitate a lifting of the freeze on Russian assets, even if the funds being returned to their rightful owner wouldn't be very straightforward. Now, the U.S., for our part, we have proposed allowing American companies to get some of that money. Remember, Trump in his last deal was like, 100 million comes to us, 100 billion, 100 billion goes to you, but we use the first 100 billion, which we get the profits off of. Remember that? That was part of the 28-point peace plan. But for both Euroclear and the EU, this is much more than a question of tallying numbers on a spreadsheet. The clearinghouse is not a physical asset that can withstand poor management and remain intact to be passed on to new owners. So the clearinghouse isn't a bank. It's a transfer mechanism where the money goes, or it holds big-time funds like this. It lives by the trust investors place in it to be reliable custodian of those assets. When people are in New York and they're trading on the value of assets. Assets held by a place like Euroclear are a huge part of funds that huge managers take, and people are running from those because the assets are not secure. And the history has shown how quickly financial institutions find themselves in peril once trust is broken. Russia's lawsuit in Moscow is hardly decisive. Nobody agrees that this is going to mean anything huge because they still got to find somewhere to enforce it once they win. But it has pushed matters to a very uncomfortable realm for those wanting to steal Russia's money, because now they're going to have to come out, not out of the closet, because we all already know what the EU wants to do with it, and what they've already decided. So world is heating up even further with Trump sued BBC for $10 billion. He accused them of a state broadcaster of attempting to influence last year's election. And this is it's a medium-sized article, so I'll go ahead and share it with you. Trump sued. He accuses the state broadcaster of doctoring video of his January 6, 2021 speech to make it appear that he incited violence at the U.S. Capitol. In the lawsuit filed in federal court in Miami on Monday, he claims that the BBC spliced remarks made an hour apart and juxtaposed them with scenes of protesters marching to Congress, footage that was recorded before Trump had even begun speaking. They had me saying things I never said, actually put terrible words in my mouth. The BBC admitted last month that the edit gave the mistaken impression that President Trump made a direct call for violent action. Why would you admit that? Even if you did it, they're going to settle. Trump won't get his $10 billion, but he might get some money out of this because now they've admitted it and they issued a formal apology. Chairman Samir Shah wrote directly to Trump to express her sincere regret and pledge not to rebroadcast the segment ever. So this is what they put, and the lawsuit was filed. Complaint and demand. It doesn't tell you. Let's see where it is, because here's the pleadings. U.S. District Court, Southern District of Florida. It doesn't have a case number yet. Yeah, it does. 25 CV 25894. And this is all e-filed. 33 pages. I don't have the whole 33 pages. I'm gonna have to find it. I'm gonna download that for us, and maybe we'll go into that. It'll be kind of fun to get the whole 33 pages and see how Trump's lawyer would file this suit. Hell, maybe I'll use it as an example for when I got work, in the works. Trump previously accused the BBC of attempting to influence the vote with the documentary, which was aired a week before the presidential election last year. The lawsuit denounces it as a brazen attempt to interfere in and influence the election's outcome to President Trump's detriment. He seeks $5 billion in damages for defamation, an additional $5 billion under Florida's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act. His legal team describes the broadcaster's conduct as malicious, arguing that the selective editing could never have occurred by accident. A spokesman for Trump said the BBC has a long pattern of deceiving its audience in coverage of President Trump, all in the service of its own leftist political agenda. Well, that's where we are today. It is 1984. It is George Orwell. It is propaganda wins, propaganda fight all over. We got the Z Monster creating stories of victory, him in Green Goblin attire, hanging out in Seversk, which is really under Russian control. And we got the BBC creating, editing stories to make it sound like people said something that they didn't, and then apologizing later. That was foolish. If you had done something, you should have done it privately, by phone only, hopefully that nobody ever recorded. And now you got the admission, you're just screwed. And this can't have occurred by accident. It's absolutely true, because you obviously didn't do something. Maybe you have to add a count in there for all kinds of stuff. Negligent hiring, negligent retention. Who the hell put this in there in the first place? Why'd you hire such a dirt bag? I mean, in order to get this done. The BBC made no comment following the filing of the case, but previously they stated they'd received no contact from Trump's lawyers after the apology. Now, if you're stuck in a position like that and you got a case that you want to file, a lot of times it's common, or it's an effort. You have your lawyer, your legal team, contact them and say, look, because BBC knew this was coming. And I mean, there's no doubt. And so the lawyers, what typically the strategizing would take place thusly. You would sit there and say, well, listen, maybe we should contact these BBC folks and try to get some money out of them. So this isn't about money for Trump. It really isn't. It's about the propaganda too. It's about the picture. I'm standing up to these a-holes on your behalf, America. You don't give a crap about $10 billion. You don't give a crap about any of that. If I had $1 billion, I'd never care about money again in my life. I mean, hell, probably have 1 million do it for me. I don't have those high tastes. More is better, obviously, but I don't really care. I just want to be able to live comfortably and do the things I like to do. 10 billion? Oh, I'm in. Just throw it my way. But if somebody said something bad about me, I'm kind of thinking I couldn't sue for $10 billion. Maybe I will, but I haven't lost a presidential election. And so, but the typical strategizing would be, all right, have my legal team call BBC and get some money. Trump didn't do that, and they would have paid him. They would have paid him off. You know what? Maybe they could agree to meet and negotiate and do something, but allegedly that has not happened. And they stated they haven't gotten any contact from Trump. The BBC network, funded through a compulsory license fee in the UK, says that there is no legal basis for the defamation claim, and said that they will contest the lawsuit in court to protect our license fee payers. Because in order to get BBC, you got to pay. So keep your head on that. Here's something, an act of vandalism following the deadly shooting at a Jewish celebration on Sunday. A Muslim cemetery has been vandalized in Sydney with butchered pig heads, an apparent act of retribution following Sunday's massacre at a Jewish celebration. The cemetery was targeted Monday morning, and police received reports before 6 a.m. that animal remains had been left at the entrance. Officers attended the scene, removed the pig heads, and opened an investigation. The act of vandalism, and then they have pictures showing the pig heads laying around. They don't eat pork, obviously. The act of vandalism followed the attack at a Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach. 16 people killed, dozens injured. The suspects were Sajid Akram and his son Navid Akram, and the incident is being treated as a terrorist attack. They said that explosives were discovered in a vehicle linked to one of the gunmen, and the Australian broadcaster ABC reported that investigators believe the pair had pled allegiance to the Islamic State, ISIS. Muslims consider pigs ritually impure under Islamic law. Acts involving pig remains are widely understood as deliberately offensive. It is prominent funeral director, the guy over the cemetery. It's owned by the Lebanese Muslim Association, condemned the attack as senseless and hateful. I happen to agree. Nonsense. Local Muslim man was praised for intervening. I'm not positive that he was. There's been a lot of different talk about that. It was an interesting video, though. I saw the video. I'm not so sure. I wouldn't have shot the guy if it was me that did it. If you've seen that video, because he held the gun on the guy and the guy was running away. I think he later sat down and the guy kind of held him there at gunpoint, but he may have wandered off too. But I think they ultimately caught him, and the guy attacked him, took the gun, and pointed it at him. I'm not so sure I wouldn't have fired at him in the leg or something, hold him up. I might have done something. On the note, and I brought up this Muslim cemetery, I went to a Muslim funeral once for a guy I knew in Russia. And it was in Russia that I went to this Muslim funeral. And it was very interesting. I obviously never have done anything like that before. But it was quite the learning experience to go to a Muslim funeral. And the guy's name was Farid, and Farid served in the Russian army. Real good guy. He gave me once a mink hat. I still have the mink hat, and one of those Russian style hats that you wear in the winter that just cover top of your head. And it's cool, and it's made out of real mink, and it's very nice. And at any rate, the funeral with an imam, so there's an imam that comes, and the family of the Muslim person who passed away, they give everybody gifts, and you go. It's a feast. You sit there and you have a full dinner. It goes on for a couple hours. The imam does certain rituals that they go through. He sits at the head of the table, and it was extremely interesting to me, especially as I don't know, I'm not a non-believer. I'm a religious guy, but I in my own way, but I don't have a particular belief that I subscribe to, and I'm one of those guys that believes that there's any God that I would believe in wouldn't condemn half of the world to die because they're non-believers. I got a problem with that. And so maybe that's wrong. I don't know. But if they believe a different way, they have a different path. That doesn't mean they're not a ton of good people involved in other religions that do it. And killing them on beaches in Bondi is bullshit, pardon my French. Leaving pig heads at a cemetery is also bullshit. It's just wrong. And if you can't honor the people of the world for being people of the world, maybe I'm naive to believe that we do. But I lived in Qatar. It's a Muslim country, and it wasn't a horror event to live there. In fact, quite the opposite. It is safe. It's structured. It's different. Maybe I'll give a lecture on that sometime. But as the show winds down, I'd like people to consider these sorts of things. Let's see. Should we share one more story? Nah. Well, there's some more about the Euroclear thing. The seizure of these Russian funds will erode the international financial system, which was built around U.S. interests and U.S. funding. This, according to senior aide to Russian president. His name is Kirill Dmitriev. He's pretty vocal. The EU wants to issue Kiev a reparation loan backed by Russian assets. The president's advisor, President Putin's advisor on international investment matters, said that the panicked EU officials that are backing Kiev are making a serious miscalculation. By asserting a claim to the assets, they undermine the current system of national reserves globally and drive up costs for all participants in the global financial system. Russia will win in court, he said, and get the sovereign funds returned. EU guarantors will pay Ukraine's bill. The EU, the Euro, and Euroclear will suffer, he said. Euroclear is based in Belgium. Euroclear holds $47 trillion in other people's money. $47 trillion. That's a butt ton of money, isn't it? Well, I appreciate you being here on the show today. Join me every day, 7:30 to 9, here at demradio.com. You can listen to all my shows at internationalflavor.com soon after they are done, if you wish to hear the entire broadcast. We're here every day at demradio.com/live. Plenty of / schedule. You can check the schedule, and I hope you do. Join us every single day on International Flavor, 7:30 to 9. Goodbye.